And maybe after all the talks, maybe I can just say ditto, and we can really be short. My talk is usually 45 minutes, so as Edie said, we face challenges, and it's going to be a challenge to get some of this out. But Mark Twain was the Jon Stewart of his day. He was an outspoken opponent of the Spanish-Philippines War. He actually was always telling really, really sad, harsh truth, but he tried to do it in a funny way. And these were a couple of his quotes. The last one, nobody can answer. Why is moral courage more rare than physical courage? We've heard a lot about physical courage, especially in the military. I was in law enforcement. Rescues, you know the perfect storm where the Coast Guard drops into the 20-foot wave to rescue the people on the top of the boat who had disregarded the Coast Guard's warnings. I think that in the FBI, we had an ethics PowerPoint 1 week before 9/11. If you can imagine, I taught ethics 1 week before, and one of the things that was in this PowerPoint was breaking it up, the process of coming up with the right decision, the right ethical decision. The first step, and again, I'll go back to Edie, she just said it, was thinking. It's using your brain. It's discernment's the big word for this. In many physical courage situations, as many of our speakers have said, they have practiced. The Coast Guard doesn't have to think when they drop into the 20-foot wave because they have practiced that, and they have also signed on the dotted line, as military folks have, that they're willing to risk their lives. So they've actually their brain doesn't have to think real hard in those situations. In most other situations, you do have to think. My co-persons of the year found themselves in fraudulent corporations that were defrauding their shareholders and their customers and their employees. Now, when you find yourself in that situation, you haven't really practiced for it. The second thing is then you do have to have this courage to follow through, and that's what a lot of speakers have talked about. How do you summon the courage? I put in a third step here, and I don't know if you can read all of that, but it says how. Acting constructively and openly, incorporating well-established universal ethical and legal principles and shared human wisdom, learn the hard way through history, instead of concocting ends justify the means, which is known as act utilitarianism. And some examples of that are, we have to torture in order to find the time bomb to save New York City. We've heard this before. Orwell's, we have to bomb the village to save it. War is peace. And so there are many principles that humans have discovered. You don't have to be the first one to discover these things, because over hundreds of years, things like empathy, well, we have the golden rule. We have many strong warnings about secrecy. These warnings are in the Bible even. There's a warning that says everything secret will be made known. Jesus said it. So these things are not something that we have to debate now. Is secrecy protect us? If our officials will keep these 92 million secrets that are classified secrets, many of which are like the Daniel Ellsberg ones that the community should know about, we shouldn't need to debate them because these are universal fundamental principles, and when in doubt, rely upon those Kantian always do right type principles. And if you do all of that, you will arrive at the end where if you follow ethics and law, adherence to the rule of law, you will actually equals effectiveness. Many times when they posit these ends justify the means, they tell you that, my next slide, by the way, comes from the FBI's PowerPoint. And this is a perfect example of ends justify the means. If you're on the witness stand and your evidence isn't quite so good, or your lab test didn't come out exactly right, there's a strong tendency, because you want to put a bad guy in jail, right? You have a good, noble goal. And so you want to do that, and there's a strong tendency to puff, shade, tailor, firm up, stretch, massage, or tidy up statements of fact. This was actually a warning we gave to FBI agents a week before 9/11. Now, after 9/11, people all forgot this, and there was a real cover-up of sorts about not telling the truth about how many warnings had come to officials in the months before 9/11, why weren't the dots connected, and we were really stopped from learning what happened, what went wrong, why were they not able to find these terrorists. I personally knew of a couple of cases where a terrorist that was involved was actually arrested before, in August, the months before of 9/11. And so nobody in the public knew this. And it turns out there were many ways of preventing 9/11 if people had simply told the truth. And I will just say one more thing. The 9/11, it's not me saying this. This is the 9/11 Commission that found that 9/11 itself, the terrorist attacks, were caused by the failure to share information inside of agencies, so it didn't go up the chain to the bosses. Between agencies, the CIA didn't tell the FBI that 2 of the terrorist suspects had come into California. And then the last one, the failure to share information with the public. And if they had just shared some pieces of the information they already knew, the 9/11 Commission said that it wouldn't have happened. The terrorists themselves, if they'd known these things, would have stopped their attack. So we find out that it wasn't a lack of torture or starting wars or anything like that. It was a lack of sharing information, public openness. This other thing also from the FBI's ethics talk that I gave, misplaced loyalties. Okay, so in whistleblowing, your top loyalty has to be to your broadest, they call it the public good. It can't be to yourself, and it can't even be to your boss. Somebody asked me this morning, what's the difference between working for a man and working for the law? And of course, it's really difficult to be loyal to a principle or to the law. It's a lot easier to be loyal to a person. Now, I have here this isn't my old boss, but the old FBI director. You're going to have to be about 60 or more to understand. We had a really kind of unusual FBI director for 47 years, J. Edgar Hoover. And the way he kept people from telling the truth about what he was doing, and he did some good things. He's like a lot of people, mixed bags. He did some good things. He started FBI fingerprints so that he could identify. He was the genius behind fingerprints. But he also had this loyalty quote posted all over FBI headquarters. And I often ask people, what's wrong with this? If you maybe, I put it in pink in the first part, maybe you can't read it. If you work for a man, in heaven's name, work for him, speak well of him, stand by him, and stand by the institution he represents. If put to a pinch, an ounce of loyalty is worth a pound of cleverness. If you must vilify, condemn, and eternally complain, then resign your position. And when you are on the outside, then damn to your heart's delight. But while you remain a part of the institution, speak well of it. Otherwise, the first big wind that comes along will blow you away, and you may never know why. Can you imagine this warning all over inside your workplace? And of course, if you really know something that's going on wrong, you're going to be afraid, you're going to be blown away. Now, the problem with this is the first 5 words, if you work for a man. People started to believe they worked for J. Edgar Hoover. They worked for the taxpayers. They were paid by the government, and their highest loyalty is supposed to be to the Constitution, not to J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover, at the end, during the Vietnam War, ordered people to do highly illegal things. They they called them black bag jobs, which meant they broke into offices. They broke into Martin Luther King's hotel rooms, planted recorders, and then used the information to try to blackmail our Martin Luther King, probably one of the main heroes. He has a federal holiday, was actually threatened, or I should say suggested, that he commit suicide by the FBI's anonymous COINTELPRO. And when it later came out in the 70s that this had happened, the guy that told about it, the whistleblower at the time, he said, when we sat around the table and we devised these plots to go after Martin Luther King, to go after the anti-war, to go after feminists, when we devised those plots, he said, no one asked, is it legal, is it moral, is it ethical? And I would suggest this might have been one of the reasons no one piped up. This is another reason. This is the Esch test, and I know there are some social psychologists you've heard from. We're not going to do the test, but A and X match. They're the exact same length. But what the social psychologist Esch found out is when he brought 3 people in together, and by prior agreement, the first 2 were his confederates, and they picked the shortest line, B, to match X. When you are the third person and the other 2 have picked the shortest line, even though your eyes tell you, no, it can't be B, when you are the third person, 2/3 of the time or so, you go with the flow. And that isn't even in a workplace where you're going to lose your job. This was later confirmed in many other different tests very similar to this. This is a diagram of conflicting loyalties, and it's really what I just said. Most times when you're helping yourself and you're helping your friends and family and your workplace and your state and your country, and many speakers have talked about, I mean, we had the young lady who has traveled the world. And what did she say our highest loyalty should be? To the earth, to the mankind, to humanity. And the problem is we get caught up in these other, smaller loyalties. I don't know if you can read this, but this is a prediction or a warning that if mankind, now that has discovered the way we can actually destroy the world real easily with all the nuclear bombs, and yet the big question is, do we have the intellectual and moral capacity to control our worst instincts? I'm going to skip that one. And this is what I said, the 3. Okay, this is this is my favorite cartoon because, one of the ways of people are reluctant to speak out is they're going to be called a name. They're going to be called tattletale, at the very least, that'd be the nice one, but snitch or traitor, because they don't see the broadest loyalty. And she says, I prefer whistleblower. And the whistleblower test. I have this on me, so if you don't copy it down quickly, you can get some handouts I have. But it has to be significant. You don't tell the truth in our environment unless it's very serious. You cannot be personally motivated. You have to turn out to be correct, like Daniel Ellsberg or Edward Snowden. And then you must pursue the most constructive way for the situation. So I really appreciate your time and attention, and good luck, everyone, on being a hero. I'm going to be looking in the papers for some of you people to say, I remembered this from the Hero Conference.
That's right. That's right.